Hello and welcome to Trial TV Live. I am the Squeegee of Justice. Thank you so much for joining us today as we are going to pick back up on a trial that we covered back in June. Yep. Started June 17th and ended July 7th. So it is Connecticut versus Raul Valle. And we're going to, some things have happened, obviously, in the last 2 weeks, which is why we're going to cover it. But before we get to that, we're going to find out, we're going to look at how we got here. Right, so I have about an hour and a half worth of some videos to play, to go over. The end result is that Raul was recharged. So the date, let's just kind of review, let's reset and review everything here. But before that, I just want to welcome in some people. We have Aaron E. and Gloria, Sarcasm saying hello, and LOL Bird. Thank you for joining us. Karen, Fur Baby's mom. Thank you. Always good to see you guys. Johnny Cuddy. Yeah, there's sentiments that way as well, Johnny. I agree, but there's also sentiments of it was they overcharged. So it's kind of, we're on both sides of that. JMS, good to see you. Thank you for joining us. Oh, Mrs. Baba Yaga, good to see you. Selena K, thank you. Andrielle, Hazel, Sue, and Kelly. Katie Cat, good to see you. Red Snap and Jamie. Sue, hello. Thank you for joining us. Stephanie saying good morning. Debbie Blair. Brat, thank you for joining us. Kimmel, yeah, well, we have kitties all over the house right now, so we're trying to maintain them and manage them. So Putting cords in a pipe might not be a bad idea. We'll have to explore that. Kimmy, good morning to you. Gretchen, good to see you. Colleen, good to see you. Ooh, back surgery prep. Ouch. Hopefully that goes well. Joe and Jedi Platypus. Awesome. Thank you for joining us. Angelique and Ruby. Nanny and Melissa and Fanny Pack. Lindsay, Edward, good to see you guys. Thank you so much. Psychosaurus Rex. Awesome. Chasing Sunshine, good morning from Missouri. Alita, good morning to you. And Nanny, well, wait, is there going to be an actual court hearing or is it just a recap? It's not a court hearing. It's basically a recap and to talk about how he is recharged. So it's not a trial, not really a recap, but I just wanted to go, I kind of wanted to finish what we started, meaning press conferences, a juror spoke, the foreperson actually spoke. The McGrath spoke, Kevin Smith spoke, which was the defense attorney, and then the new charges. So I just kind of want to tie a bow on it, I guess, or just finish up what we started with the verdict, because usually we like to have press conferences after the verdict, and they didn't release them until later. So now I'm just sort of putting everything together for you guys. So the date of the incident was May 14th, 2022. Raul Valle, as you can see there in the upper left, he is the defendant, the victim that got stabbed. There were actually 4 of them. Jimmy, he's the one that lost his life. And then Ryan, Thomas, and Faison all got stabbed. Ryan and Tommy had fatal injuries, but they got to the hospital in time. They weren't so fatal that they passed away right there on the spot, like Jimmy did. Faison, his injury was to his arm under right here. So his wasn't considered fatal, so that's why initially it was first degree the initial charges were first degree M, which was on Jimmy, and then 3 first degree assaults, which were on Faison, Ryan, and Thomas. Now the new charges are first degree reckless manslaughter. Now these were the ones that they were not hung on. These are the charges they were hung on. So they found him not guilty of all the first degrees, the assault and the deletion. It was the reckless manslaughter, the reckless assault. That's where they were hung on, because those were the lesser included. So that's kind of where we are right now. So let's go and watch some video here. We'll sort of set the scene, and then we'll talk a little bit more about what they are, why they are charging him. All right, so let's go here. Let's get ourselves situated. And we will be covering Washington versus Ali. Don't fret. We will be covering Washington versus Ali. We're just that's going to be in about 2 hours, so that's why we're doing this now. Okay. Hey, Joni, good to see you. Thank you for joining us. Widespread Panic, awesome. Thank you for joining us. And Gretchen. All right. Everything okay in there? I got my audio's all fine. My audio sounds good. All right. All right, let's get to, first of all, we're going to start with how we got to him being recharged. So first of all, we're going to start with the verdict. We're going to listen to some interviews, and then we're going to take it from there.
Guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
Right now at 6, a jury finds the suspect in the fatal stabbing of a Fairfield prep student not guilty of murder.
I'm not sure, they're in the same courtroom as we all were together, but that's the verdict, and we'll live with it.
The family of Jimmy McGrath shocked. Raul Valle walking out of court relieved. Our live team coverage starts right now. Good evening and thanks for joining us here for the news at 6. I'm Keisha Grant. It's a partial verdict in a case that has stunned the state. A 17-year-old stabbed to death at a house party in Shelton in 2022. Jimmy McGrath lost his life and 3 others were injured. Valle took the stand in his own defense, breaking down in tears on the witness stand. And now the jury has spoken. Not guilty on murder, manslaughter, and assault, but the jury was deadlocked on lesser charges. We have live team coverage for you tonight with NBC Connecticut's Jennifer Cuevas and Kyle Jones. We want to begin with Jennifer live in Milford with much more on today's verdict. Jennifer.
Keisha, in the moments leading up to that verdict being read out loud, the courtroom was entirely packed, and there were at least 10 marshals inside just making sure that everything was under control. As we know, this entire process has been very emotional. But once it was read out loud, you could just feel that sense of relief from Raul Valle and his entire support system, while also the disbelief from Jimmy McGrath's father and his family and friends. Now, right now, you're taking a look at that video of Valle looking completely stunned as that verdict was shared. He began crying as he hugged his defense attorney and then turned around and hugged his brothers and mother. Court marshals eventually escorting him and his family out. But as for James McGrath's father, Kevin McGrath, he says he respects the verdict, but he did make a comment on whether or not the jury was in the same courtroom as all of us.
Just in shock that an innocent young man with a brilliant potential is not with us anymore, and the person that took his life is right now free tonight.
So, Keisha, a heavy day to say the least for both of these sides in different ways, but ultimately the judge thanked everyone for their conduct, including Raul Valle. She wished him the best in his future. Reporting live in Milford, Jennifer Cuevas, NBC Connecticut News. Back to you, Keisha.
Jennifer, thank you. NBC Connecticut's Kyle Jones was also inside that courtroom in Milford when the verdict was read today. Kyle, what happens next?
Keisha, there are a couple of different things that could happen next. So Valle was found not guilty on those charges of the murder and the manslaughter and several assault charges, but there were lesser included charges that were declared a mistrial, and those were assault first degree reckless, assault second degree reckless, and manslaughter reckless. So those charges were the ones that were deemed the mistrial, leading into this partial verdict that we heard today. So all of this stems from the May 2022 fight in which Jimmy McGrath was stabbed along with 3 others at a fight at a house party on Laurel Glen Drive. So throughout this entire trial, 13 days, 25 witnesses were called by the state, and the video of that altercation was shown. It was the second fight of that night. The jury found Valle not guilty on the 4 counts, including the murder charge, and the mistrial charges mean that the state could potentially refile those charges to try to get justice there again. But here's what the McGrath's attorneys had to say about that seeking justice for the family.
There are many civil cases that are still pending. It is a civil arena, not a criminal arena. So there are different standards of care, and there is a different burden of proof.
And so that different burden of proof is a little bit lower in civil cases. So those pending cases are still out there for others that were involved in that night. And the attorney said that they want to try to find everyone who was involved and seek justice through the civil court case that way. Live in Milford, I'm Kyle Jones, NBC Connecticut News. Keisha, back to you.
Kyle, thank you. And we have more coverage on the verdict right now on the NBC Connecticut YouTube page.
All right, so that's obviously right after it happened. So we're just going to go through. Now the next is the four-person. So I have a couple of videos of the four-person, four-man, if you will, because he is male after all. All right, so let's hear his perspective. There's going to be, I think I have three of these. I have an extended one. Excuse me. I have a few short ones, and then I have an extended one. So let's check this out. Hey, Chantal, good to see you. Good morning. And John, the case, did you see it was Doherty is the guy. He shot and deleted a Orlando Magic basketball player. So that's starting today, I think. So we're going to pick up on that tomorrow while we're in verdict watch with Ali. All right.
The instructions, we follow the law. We did what we were supposed to do.
A juror in the dramatic Raul Valle trial is speaking to Channel 3 tonight. Thanks for joining us on Eyewitness News at 6. I'm Erin Connolly.
And I'm Mark Zinni. That juror is sharing key details about the deliberations and why they decided Valle was not guilty of murdering Jimmy McGrath.
Your reporter Dylan Fearon just spoke to that juror. He is live outside the Milford courthouse with the story. Dylan.
Mark, Aaron, we just spoke to Jim Stuhlman. He was juror number 10 during this dramatic trial, and the foreman, he was the one who announced the not guilty verdict to the judge yesterday here in Milford. Jim tells Channel 3 tonight he's relieved the trial is over and is confident the jury made the right call.
They just didn't have enough to prove the case.
Juror Jim Stuhlman says the prosecution didn't come close to proving Raul Valle intended to kill Jimmy McGrath, that the easiest decision for the jury was on the murder charge.
There was so much inconsistencies and contradictions. Not everyone will be happy with the conclusion. We weren't happy that we couldn't come on the final counts. But I think we did everything we could have to get as far as we did.
The jury agreed unanimously on the most serious charges, murder, manslaughter, and assault, but were hopelessly deadlocked on the lesser charges, reckless manslaughter and reckless assault, the judge ordering a mistrial on those charges. Stuhlman claims the jury didn't even discuss self-defense. Their decisions had everything to do with the prosecution failing to prove intent.
It just came down to the intent, reckless, what a reasonable person would do, those kind of things. I think we went according to the instructions. We followed the law. We did what we were supposed to do.
Raul Valle was set to speak to the press after the verdict, then encouraged by his attorney, Kevin Smith, to stay silent. Smith sent Channel 3 a statement tonight, writing, "As all the families involved reflect on the outcome, we simply wish to express our gratitude to the jurors for their dedication, our respect for Judge Murphy and her studiousness and fairness throughout the trial, our admiration for the decency and integrity with which attorneys Durso and Messina conducted themselves." Meanwhile, prosecutors may decide to refile the lesser charges the jury was hung on. Rob Sanders is an attorney and lecturer at the University of New Haven.
It should take months, not a half a year worth of months, but months. Maybe in the fall, you might see something happen.
It was an experience. We're glad it's over, but I think it was, if someone had to be a part of it, I think we had, myself and the 11 others were the right people for the job.
The prosecution has also been silent, Mark and Aaron. Still nothing from the state's attorney's office tonight. I'm your reporter live in Milford, Dylan Fearon, Channel 3 Eyewitness News.
All right, so that's one interview, right? So that's really good to hear that he felt that they did not prove intent. So let's hear. I've got two more. I actually have three more of his. Let's just see if these are the same interview or not. I don't think they are. They may be different. Let me just see if this is, it's the same juror. Let's just see. Then I have an extended interview with him. So let's see if he should pretty much say the same thing, I would think, but let's just see.
The state have been waiting for, and this morning we're hearing from one of the jurors who found Raul Valle not guilty of murdering Jimmy McGrath.
NBC Connecticut's Julia Blanc has been following this case. She joins us live outside of Milford Court with more. Good morning, Julia.
Hi, good morning to you both. Yeah, just 2 days ago, Raul Valle walked out of this courthouse here in Milford as a free man. And the foreperson who announced that not guilty verdict says the one thing he will take with him forever is the raw reaction, that raw emotion he saw on Valle's face when those decisions came down, which he feels are the right ones. Now, James Stuhlman, once again, the foreperson for this jury in this trial, spoke with our Jennifer Cuevas, saying jurors put everything they had into deliberations. He says they tried to remove emotions from their decisions as much as possible, and when looking at the facts, they felt the state simply did not prove their case for intentional manslaughter and murder and assault beyond a reasonable doubt. That decision, he says, came quickly.
Within minutes, it was clear that the 11 of us felt not guilty because we thought it was overcharged and the state couldn't possibly prove, because the state has to prove so many elements of a certain case.
Now, Stuhlman says the one juror who felt otherwise came back the next morning with a change of heart. He says there's no question Raul Valle did stab 4 people that May night back in 2022, including 17-year-old Jimmy McGrath, who we know now did not make it. But for the jurors, it was about putting themselves in Valle's shoes at that time as a 16-year-old.
If you can put yourself in that place as what they call a reasonable person, we had to compare what he did to what a reasonable person would do in the same circumstances.
Well, Stuhlman says the fact that 2 witnesses testified against Valle and had immunity for that testimony really didn't play too much of a factor into their deliberations, and neither did the self-defense argument put on by Valle. He says really when it came down to it all for the jurors, it was just about what did state prosecutors prove and what did they not prove. Taylor and Bree.
And Julia, we know this was a partial verdict with jurors not able to come to a decision on the lesser charges.
Did he reveal what the holdup was?
He did. He said, unfortunately, they were not able to reach a verdict on those lesser charges, which were reckless manslaughter and reckless assault in several forms, first and second degree. He says they were 11-1 on those lesser charges, leaning towards guilty, but they could not get that last person to agree with the majority. And it has to be a unanimous decision in order to come to a verdict. So he says the legal process played out as it should have here.
All right, Julia, thank you so much for your reporting throughout the case.
So interesting. So we did hear, he just said they were hung on the lesser charges. They were leaning 11-1 towards guilty. So that's how close he came to being in jail right now. 11-1. That's where they got hung, was 11-1. Right? Very, very interesting. All right, I've got another short clip of the foreperson, and then we will go to an extended interview of him. So let's check this out. So 11-1, they were hung on 11-1, going towards guilty on the lesser included. So to me, I'm thinking the state interviewed these jurors, and that's probably why they recharged him, because they now feel, hey, we were 11-1 guilty. All we have to do is just convince one more person. I think the second go around, he's probably going to be found guilty. I'm just throwing that out there right now. But if they were 11-1 leaning towards guilt, just on the lessers, they already said he wasn't guilty on the other ones. I'm sorry, they said he was not guilty on the other ones. But now these lesser ones, they were 11-1 saying guilty. I think that's going to be probably pretty that's going to be a lot easier to get him guilty on those. So let's continue on.
A jury reached this week in the murder trial of 20-year-old Raul Valle. He was acquitted in the deadly Shelton house party stabbing. Now, 24 hours later, one of the jurors tasked with deciding his fate is speaking exclusively with News 8 reporter Zuri Hoffman. Zuri's live with us now with more on what that juror had to say today. Zuri.
Well, James Stolman says he never served on a jury before and really had no idea how big of a case this was while he was in the courtroom. That's because jurors have to be off the grid while the trial is going on. He tells me despite all of the opinions and emotions surrounding this trial, he believes he and his fellow jurors made the right decision.
Nothing like on TV.
A very real case with Raul Valle's life on the line. Stolman says jurors had to leave all of their emotions outside the courtroom.
They really emphasized how important it was to leave the whole sympathy thing and our emotions out of it and just really try to concentrate on the elements that were trying to be proven.
Jurors felt like those elements were not proven, finding Valle not guilty on the most serious charges of murder and manslaughter in the 2022 stabbing death of Jimmy McGrath. But the process to get to that conclusion wasn't straightforward. On Monday, jurors told the judge they couldn't make a decision.
They sent us back in, and again, we talked, we reconsidered things, and some people, and no one compromised and voted on something they didn't really believe in. And so the changes that happened were really for the right reasons.
Was that the case for you? Did you end up changing your mind?
Yeah, a couple of times.
You did? And why was that?
Just initially after hearing, it could be just the definition of a word. One word can change the meaning of something, and so there was so much to consider. You know, what we saw, what we remembered, what we didn't.
The defense team only calling one witness, Raul Valle himself.
That was the emotional part, and I'm glad he did testify because it gave a different perspective.
And despite the facts of this case,
there was no question that the elements they proved, he did that. He had a weapon, and he did stab 4 people.
Stolman said jurors had more to consider when looking at sending a man to prison for more than 100 years.
It was all about, did the prosecution prove every element of the charge? And we just felt they didn't.
When I asked Stolman about his message to the victim's family,
I hope they understand that even though they might disagree with what we concluded, that we really did the best we could. And we tried to follow the rules and the law and apply that just the way we should have.
Yeah, now Stolman says this was not an easy decision. Jurors spent more than 11 hours deliberating and going over this case, ultimately reaching the verdict of not guilty. Reporting live in the newsroom, I'm Zuri Hoffman, News 8.
All right, so that is, we've heard 3 times now. So let's, he said, no one compromised or voted incorrectly. He said he changed his mind a couple of times, actually. He was glad that Raul testified. He said the state proved that he did have a weapon and that he stabbed 4 people, but the state did not prove every element of the charge. All right, so now we're going to hear from this juror. Actually, let's hear from Jimmy's family first. You know what? I want to go here. Let's go to Raul. Let's go to Kevin Smith first. I'm gonna save Jimmy for last. We'll save Jimmy's family for last because I think he deserves to have the final say.
Normally, I wouldn't.
Oh, sorry guys. Sorry for that. Ugh, that popped. Terrible. Sorry. All right, so let's. This is Kevin Smith. All right, this is Kevin Smith. This is his press conference. This is Raul Valle's lawyer, defense lawyer. So this is his press conference. All right, sorry, hold on. Just give me a second. Get the audio sorted here. All right, here we go.
address a case through the media, but I think in this instance it's important to make an exception because I can tell you there has been so much interest from all parts of the country. I've had people that have called from as far away as Washington State, and just from all over the country. So I recognize that there is some special interest in this case, and I hope that perhaps by speaking today I can quell some of that interest, and all the parties involved will be able to maybe get some peace and time to process this, and the publicity can die down a bit. I want to first thank the jurors whose dedication to the process here I think was just inspiring. It was obvious. A friend of mine sent me a clip of the jury foreman speaking to the media yesterday, and I was so moved by how he spoke about their process and what they had done and how they came to the conclusion that they came to. And I think it spoke to the fact that this jury followed the instructions that they were given. They followed the law, set aside their sympathies, as they told us that they would do when we picked them as jurors. And I think that it's what we expected of these jurors when we picked them because we got to know them, but it's what we should expect, I think, of all jurors, is that they're going to set aside their sympathies, follow the law as it's given to them, and as they told us they would do, that they would follow it wherever it led, no matter if they necessarily liked that place that it came to or if it made people happy or unhappy. So that was inspiring to me. I also want to thank Judge Murphy. She showed a steady hand throughout the trial that certainly contributed to the fairness that I think was evident throughout the process. She was studious and deliberate. That was evident in the jury instructions, which were thorough, and I think was in no small part due to how the process went in this instance. And I think it was a difficult trial. There was nothing easy about it from the second we learned that it was going to be live streamed and all of that, and she more than rose to the occasion. And I also have to note the prosecutors in this case, attorneys Durso and Messina. I know that it was also an emotional and all-consuming experience for them, the outstanding professionalism that they showed, that their staff showed, the honesty and dignity with which they prosecuted their case. Again, it's what we should hope for from our prosecutors and from our system. Apologize. And I want to thank the clerks and the marshals. They made sure that this case was conducted in a courthouse that's very small. And if y'all were there, you know these families were sitting side by side practically, having to go through this, having to relive this. The clerks and the marshals made sure it was done efficiently, it was done fairly, everybody had access to the courtroom, and they showed the same kindness to both sides, no matter which side they were sitting on. That needs to be commended and respected. Finally, Mr. Valle is not going to be making any public announcements anytime soon. I know that there is great interest in hearing from him and hearing him talk, but I think we can all agree that for all these kids involved, any more publicity about this right now is just simply not in their best interests. I don't know when or if any of them will ever want to speak about it, but I think they need to be given the time and the privacy to process their grief, to process what they have been through, and to recognize that none of them are ever going to be able to say what the trajectory of their life would have been like if not for that night. And they're going to be dealing with that forever. So I hope this helps folks be able to understand where we're coming from and why maybe you're not going to be hearing from Mr. Valle and that sort of thing. He took the stand at the trial, went under oath, spoke about it, and he said everything that he needs to say to anybody other than himself and his loved ones about that night. So I hope he can get that privacy. I don't know if anybody's got any questions. I'm happy to try to answer them.
Kevin, on Wednesday when we all go in there and we're told from the judge there's a partial verdict, correct me if I'm wrong, it seemed like the state was accepting of that and that you maybe had an objection to that the jury was still deadlocked on some of these charges, and then the judge sort of denied that.
No. So I think what you saw there was that at that point we knew that they had deadlocked as to some of the charges, and so the question was whether or not we were going to accept these partial verdicts, and of course we wanted these partial verdicts. The question then became, what do we do about those charges that are out there, and whether or not there was going to be a mistrial. I think that the state had wanted a Chip Smith charge, saying, get back in there and see if you can't, come to a conclusion. It was our position, and we objected to a Chip Smith charge being given because they'd already been instructed twice, and they had shown us through their notes that they were deliberating, that they were following the process. The way this should work is, and this is how they were instructed, you go through the charges and you look and you determine first, has the state proven the elements that's charged against the defendant? In this instance, they looked at the specific intent charges first, and they said no, they could not find the specific intent. If they don't find an element has been proven, then they don't even go over and then consider whether or not self-defense would have applied. They simply go on in this instruction to the next lesser included offense. And so when I heard from the jury foreman saying, we went and we found that there wasn't the intent, and then we got hung up on the recklessness aspect, we never considered self-defense. That confirmed for me what I had thought. All of us who do this line of work will tell you that the law is a practice, but the one thing that we're all professionals in is trying to read the tea leaves, because we're constantly trying to figure out, what does it mean? What does it mean? So for me, that was just interesting to have an intuition about what those tea leaves meant confirmed. And again, it was so reaffirming because it means that these jurors were following the instructions. They were following the law. They were doing what they were supposed to do. And we never get to see what goes on back there, so that was interesting.
But in that moment when you hear partial verdict, are you confident at that point? You're thinking, I think the ones they could agree on, they did agree on, was not guilty? Or what were you thinking in those moments when you hear partial verdict? Or was the confidence level?
I'll keep that one to myself. We never try and figure out what it's going to be ahead of time.
Kevin, can you talk a little bit about what Raul's reaction was to the verdicts when he heard them? What did he say to you? If you can share some of that, just to give some kind of perspective on, was it relief? Was it thankfulness? Was it, I can't believe this is really true? What did he say? Can you give us any sense of that?
If you can imagine from his perspective, since that night, the last 3 years, his life has been basically frozen in that moment to a large extent. And so imagine you've been holding your breath for 3 years, and this is the first time that you're hearing that you can breathe again without that thing holding you there like that. I think it was immense relief. I think it was also immense grief. There is not a part of Mr. Valle that has any joy or sense of celebration about that night and what occurred and what he had to do when he was in that position. And he recognizes that another person lost their life, 3 other young people were injured, and that none of their lives are ever going to be the same. So there's remorse there from him as well.
We spoke with one of the jurors yesterday, the jury foreman actually, and he said that he thought it was a good decision that Raul took the stand and spoke and gave his side of things. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about, was there a struggle as to whether or not to put him on the stand, to not put him on the stand? Just maybe your thought with that?
From my perspective, there was really no struggle. He was going to have to take the stand. In a self-defense case, when you are telling folks that you felt a certain way and you were in such danger, I can think of very few instances where there would be enough other evidence to put it on and say that you had a self-defense claim. I think that a defendant in most cases is going to need to take the stand so that the jurors can hear from them. So that the jurors, I think they want that. Even if they tell us, I'll abide by the Fifth Amendment and you don't, if he doesn't take the stand, I won't think about it. I think in a self-defense case, they almost have to hear from them, unless there's something about your client, maybe that you know that they aren't going to do particularly well on the stand because they're not going to be understood in some way. I think you almost have to in a self-defense case.
Does he feel bad about what happened to Jimmy McGrath?
I think, of course, nobody wants to ever have to take another life, and I can tell you, Mr. Valle certainly never wanted to do that. I think the evidence is clear that this was such a tragic, a pocket knife and in between the 6th and 7th. I mean, it's unfortunately a 1 in a million kind of a thing. This is not a person who had training in doing this. He didn't know this person. He was facing all of what was going on. It just, of course he feels horrible about this. That's something he's got to process.
Any reaction? It looks like the state is going to move forward now with these deadlocked charges from what we can hear and see. If you can't, you can't, but
I'm not gonna address that right now. I think it's just time for everybody to take a step back and figure out what the best way to go forward is. Let these families reflect on what they've all just gone through.
Can we circle back a little bit to some of your strategy, with the case with so many players, so to say, and the complexity of it? Can you give us some insight on how you went about all this?
I don't know that I have. I don't know that I have any special. If we could figure out what it is that we do that is successful in these things, it wouldn't be a practice so much, right? We would just bottle that up and redo it every time. This was a case, I think, where all of the different factors were there. All we did on our side was try and look at the evidence and see what it supported, and then put it out there. I wish there was a secret sauce. Like I said, I'd bottle it.
As the verdict came in, and you had your arm around Raul, and he's crying, what were you thinking?
I don't know that you are thinking in those moments. You're just trying to make the record. I was taking my notes, making sure I'm writing down my NGs beside the counts, making sure I don't miss anything. So in the moment, you're not really thinking about it as much as after you can take a breath and the jurors are walked out and there's nothing left to do on the record. And at that point, you just, I think, are just glad that it's over. This is really hard on all the people involved. The jurors have no idea what they're getting into. We talked to them for 30 minutes apiece beforehand, let's say, and try and figure out, is it something they want to do? Is it something that they've got a good sort of aptitude for? And is it not going to interfere with their lives in any more way than we can prevent? But they have no idea. In my household, we call this dad's getting dropped on trial island, because I'm there in a courthouse every day, 9 to 5. These jurors are, and then when we come home, you've got to do all the work that's necessary for the next day based on whatever happened there. And so for us, it's just a sense of relief that sort of thing is over, and slowly it starts to dawn on you the changes that this is making in other people's lives, but at least that this part is done and that there's now some ability to move forward, hopefully, for folks.
Did you have any sort of inclination when the jurors wanted to hear back part of Valle's testimony?
I knew that was, in this case, one of the key places where things occurred, right? Mr. Valle is going back onto the grass with his friends still there. And so I knew that was a place where jurors were going to be interested in what was going on in his mind. But again, whether I knew what that was going to result in, after they listened to it, I can't tell you. I had no idea.
And just real quick, also, I know in the instructions the jurors were not supposed to consider the immunity deals, but that's something that you mentioned a lot to the jurors during your closing arguments.
Oh no, the instructions, they were supposed to consider the immunities. They were supposed to, as they look at those immunity agreements, there's an instruction that specifically says, in this case, you have heard from witnesses who are testifying under an immunity agreement. Sorry for the dogs there. And you should consider that, because that goes to that person's motives and why they might be testifying, and would it shape their testimony. So they were specifically told that they could and they should consider that evidence, and I hope that they did.
Do you think those immunity deals had a big role to play in regards to jurors, because they were two key witnesses from the state?
Sure. I think that those kinds of deals always have some bearing on jurors, and they should. We should be considering whatever incentives somebody may have, whether that's just their friendship with somebody. Some of these jurors in jury selection told me that they would be wondering about witnesses because witnesses might lie for a friend, or might remember things differently when it was involving a family member, and things of that nature. So I think that's just, as a human being, that's something that people are keen on, right? You always want to know, well, who's endorsing this research, kind of thing. So I think it is important.
In your experience, when the jury came back after like an hour and a half, 2 hours of deliberating and said, we're deadlocked, did you sense that was potentially in your favor or not? Or in your experience, does that happen often? It seemed like a very short amount of time when they came back.
It did seem short to me. At the same time, I think that's another instance where the judge was so good at giving them an instruction that said, hey, if you want to take some time and go through now 2, 3, and 4, because you've indicated you're hung on count 1, and then you can come back to count 1, you can do that. And I think that then when you look at what they did, they clearly went and did that, right? They clearly went and said, okay, well, now 2, 3, and 4. And then we had some movement in their deliberations. So again, I think that was another instance of sort of a deft handling of the situation. She didn't chip smith them at that instance. She gave them something a little bit less than that, based on a case called State versus Feliciano, sort of a chip smith light. And they did. They listened. They went back. They did some more work. That was interesting.
And going back to Jeff's question, I know you don't want to get into the potential charges getting refiled, but if that did ever happen, would you represent him? Are you ready to go and do this again with Raul?
I would certainly represent Mr. Valle in the future. I'm hopeful that that is not going to be necessary.
Could you share any insight in regards to you and your client's relationship throughout this time?
Raul is a young man, same age as some of my own children. So, and he's in a crazy position, kind of all alone. I have tried to be counsel to him, and when appropriate, a friend to him, and when appropriate, give him advice that I might give my own son.
Kevin, can you talk a little bit about how the decision in retrospect to not accept the state's plea offer of 40 years, in hindsight, that seems like a really, really good decision on your part and your client's part. Was there something about that moment when they presented that you felt in your gut that you might be able to do better for your client? Can you talk about that a little bit?
I can only talk about that to the extent that there are a few decisions in a case that a client controls entirely and have nothing to do with trial strategy. One of those is how they're going to plead. So that was a decision that my client made, and that I think is fairly typical of young clients who are lacking in the experience necessary to maybe understand what 40 is. That's, if you're 16 years old, that's more than twice your lifetime. That sounds like 2 life sentences. And so they don't necessarily understand what market rates are, let's say, for sentences with cases that involve homicides and that sort of thing.
So he was pretty, am I hearing he was pretty adamant about moving forward? based on your advice too, obviously, but that
I won't get into our discussions. I will say my client was confident in his decision.
I know you said that Raul won't talk to the media now, and it's understandable, but since the verdicts and everything, have you talked to him, and how is he doing?
Yes, I've talked to Raul on a couple of occasions. I'm just trying to make sure that he's keeping his head on his shoulders, that he's able to process what he's gone through, and I think he's doing well. I've told him to try and avoid public places where he might be subjected to some some behavior that he just doesn't need anybody to harass him with or anything like that. So I think he's keeping a low profile, as he did throughout the course of the trial.
You may have already answered this, but this I can tell in your face, in your eyes, and your voice. This is an emotional case for you, obviously.
I lost 15 pounds during the trial.
Did you really?
So.
But can you just maybe talk a little bit about that? How this, did you expect that, or why do you think it was something that really kind of got you in your gut?
Anytime you've got young people, and again, young people across the whole spectrum here, right? This wasn't like a young person who was the complaining witness and a young person who was the defendant. This was young people all around the way. And young people who, to me, it seemed like had been a little bit abandoned in ways that having an adult there would have really, I think, helped. As I was examining these witnesses, I was just left trying to catch my breath at the ease and casualness with which alcohol seemed to be available and consumed by people that were far too young to be having any alcohol or that kind of access to it. And that was such a big contributor, I think, to everything that went on that night. In my closing argument, I said, this was like a torch being tossed into the straw. And it kind of had that feeling, And you watch that video and it feels like you're watching The Lost Boys or something. Y'all tired of me yet?
We appreciate you
Okay.
inviting us in. Thank you for inviting us in your house.
And I'm probably going to reach out to somebody maybe to try and coordinate sort of media stuff. I don't have anybody that does that. In the future, as we figure out what we want to do, you may get contact from that person if it's not from me. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, guys.
All right, so that was Kevin Smith, defense attorney for Raul Valle. Now I want to go back to the juror who was the foreperson, and then we're going to end it on Jimmy's family. So I'm going to give Jimmy's family the last word, if you will. So now we're going to hear from the juror again, the foreman, I guess, because he truly is a foreman. So this is an extended interview with him. All right. So this is 30 minutes. All right. So this is going to be an extended. So we're really, really, really going to get to hear what was going on in that jury room. And real quickly, you guys were asking, sorry. So you guys were asking about his new charges. So it's in our description. If you guys have any questions, go to our description. We do have a lot of info in there. But for those that haven't or didn't or whatever. Short life. Got me home from the eye doctor. Can't see very well. Well, thank you. Thank you for joining us, and I guess just listen. Just listen. Okay, so his initial charges were first degree M. That's obviously on Jimmy because he lost his life. And then 3 first degree assaults. And then all the lesser includeds were the manslaughter, reckless assault. So the jury, as we heard from the foreman, he said the state didn't prove intent and they just couldn't get there. So they found him not guilty on those. Those are harsh charges. First degree, that was a harsh charge. The manslaughter and the assaults, That's where they were hung 11-1. They were leaning guilty. Right? They were leaning guilty. So my thought right now, just throwing it out there, I think if they were 11-1 guilty, I think they're going to have a better chance of finding him guilty on those charges. What his years will be, maybe 10 years, 10, 15 years, I'm sure he'll probably, well, whatever. We're going way down the rabbit hole. But if the jury right now, if the jury was 11-1 guilty on those new charges, it doesn't take much to figure out that they're probably going to have a better chance of convincing a jury, guilty on those. But we'll see. We're going to follow this trial. We will follow this trial all the way. Well, we're following it now, and we'll follow it if it comes up again. Well, obviously it is coming up again, unless he takes a plea deal, and then we'll follow that as well. All right, so those are the new charges, the initial charges, and the players involved. So if you want to screenshot that or whatever, I hope that answers your questions. But we will continue on. Oops, didn't want to do that. I want to come over here. Okay. All right, so this is juror. This is the foreperson. This is a 31-minute interview with him. So we're really, really going to find out what was going on in that jury room.
This exclusive special report streaming on WFSB Plus. I'm Kara Sundlin. The murder of a high school student at a house party that got out of control in Shelton, Connecticut has captivated the nation as so many of you watched the murder trial of Raul Valle for the killing of 17-year-old Jimmy McGrath, a star lacrosse player at Fairfield Prep. In a stunning turn of events, Valle walked away a free man after a partial not guilty verdict for murder and manslaughter and a mistrial on the lesser charges. Today, the jury foreman, Jim Stuhlman, is here, so we can take a deep dive on what actually happened here. And I just want to thank you for coming in, because I know that it really helps, I think, for people to be able to really understand in a deeper way, beyond the soundbite, what was really going on with this verdict. So we appreciate you being here.
Okay, sure, thanks.
So let's just go back for those of you who don't actually remember. This happened about 4 years ago. We had 16-year-old Raul Valle, 17-year-old Jimmy McGrath. There's a fight at a house party. Alcohol's involved. Kids are getting out of control, and Raul Valle somehow ends up stabbing Jimmy McGrath and killing him. That part everybody agrees on, is that right?
Right.
So the tricky part was Raul Valle was charged with murder, with manslaughter. Those were serious charges. Originally, they offered him a plea deal of 60 years. 40, okay, 40 years. So I thought he would serve 40, but it was up to 60. Okay, so anyway, but they offered him a lot of prison time. The defense said no and went to trial. In this case, people have reported it was a huge win, because on the most serious charges, this jury found him not guilty. Help me understand, because there are those who say, but this 17-year-old kid is dead and he just walked away. Why did you arrive at the not guilty verdict on the most serious charge of murder?
Yeah, well, I think the first impression is, just as you said, one kid goes to a party, stabs another, kills him, so they just assume murder. But what we had to do is, according to the instructions, for each charge, there's a series of things that the state has to prove, the elements in the case. And when we looked at all the things that the state was required to prove, the murder charge didn't apply at all. Because one of the things was his intent had to be to specifically kill Jimmy McGrath for that to be a murder charge. And he didn't even know Jimmy McGrath. Yeah, he did stab someone, but we all thought, and I think even the prosecutors and the family might have thought, that a murder charge was not appropriate for this case. That it would, maybe manslaughter would be more the charge they should have charged him with in the beginning.
So basically, the jury felt the prosecutors overcharged with murder.
Yeah, no doubt about that.
So there wasn't a lot of talk or disagreement in the first charge of murder.
Yeah, well, there was initially. That was the first deadlock. The initial vote we took was 11 not guilty, 1 guilty. And so what we thought was that one person that was convinced it was not guilty was, just as I was saying, it just seemed like a murder. a young man is dead, someone else stabbed him, and they couldn't get that idea of murder out of their heads.
So the first deadlock was 11 of you saying not guilty to murder,
Right,
one holdout saying guilty because a kid is dead.
Yeah, and then by either overnight or the first thing the next morning, that person changed their mind and agreed that it was not guilty on the murder charge. And then most of the deliberations came over the manslaughter and the assault charges.
Okay, so when we move to manslaughter, and that is a lesser charge, and as you even just said, that seems more appropriate, and a lot of people were stunned that he was not found guilty on manslaughter. Explain that.
Okay, well, the first one, there were two possibilities. The first was manslaughter intentional. And so that would have to be that even though you can form intent in a matter of seconds, if you look at the whole circumstances that went on, all the confusion and the violence, that he would have to form that intent from the time he was out at the car in the 10 seconds it took him to get on the grass. And initially, most of us would have voted for the manslaughter intentional. But even though after we talked about it, it was possible that he could have formed that intent. It might have even been likely. But then again, it's on the burden of proof is on the state to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. And so with everything that was going on that night, everything that happened, for him to actually do that intentionally, we just didn't think there was anything else that the state showed us that proved that what he did was actually intentional. And then we got down to the next charge that was manslaughter reckless.
Right, which a kid is dead.
Right, and
there's
so reckless,
some sort of recklessness.
Actually, so when we read the elements that need to be proved for manslaughter reckless, to 11 of us, it seemed like those elements were almost written for this case, because one of the definitions of the reckless is that he showed extreme indifference. And so by extreme indifference, he would know that he had a weapon, and that if he went back into that situation, that there's a chance that he could seriously injure or kill someone. And that seemed to most of us to be the perfect example of exactly what he did. He showed extreme indifference in going back into that with that weapon.
But you deadlocked 11-1.
Yeah.
I know you can't tell me who was the one, but help me understand what their argument was so that perhaps Jimmy McGrath's parents can understand how is it that someone thought this isn't his responsibility.
Yeah, I think I can't speak for the one person,
But I'm sure they said their arguments.
Right. I think it goes to there's maybe something bigger to the case than that one. Like that one person might have agreed that those elements were proved. But what I think from what he was saying was the way the whole case was handled, and that they blame one 16-year-old kid for everything that happened that night, where no one else was charged, no one else was responsible. And I think even though the elements might have been proved, he just wasn't comfortable. If we did come to a 12-0 vote and we convicted him of something, that we would have been a part of a system that he thought failed everyone involved. And so that's what I think his case was, that he just wasn't going to vote for something where the state mishandled an awful lot of things in the case.
So from your perspective, it was much more about a broken system than whether or not Raul Valle actually committed that crime.
Again, I can't speak for that person, but I think just from hearing the conversations and deliberations, I believe that's where he was coming from.
Did you try to sway him?
Oh yeah, I mean, that's maybe a couple of hours worth of, and again, we made a point of he shouldn't change his vote because he just wants to go along. But if we could really convince him, of the facts, and then if he does change his mind, we were comfortable with that.
How long did you stay in that kind of deadlock while he had to think about it? Because the whole Chip Smith instruction for our viewers was it's a term used in the legal world of, hey, there's a majority and minority. The majority is going to argue and try and get the minority because we have to come to a unanimous decision. So obviously you went back and you did what the instructions are, try to get the minority to join the majority. And how long did that take? And
I would say a couple of hours, because we revisited not just the testimony, the ring camera video, the cell phone video, the element. We went over the jury instructions. We did everything we could to try to change someone's mind.
And it wasn't working.
No. Because I think also one of the things, I know the closing arguments aren't evidence. But what they do is they try to emphasize the points that they're trying to make, both the prosecution and the defense, and the key points to remember. And so if you remember, they each had kind of a key sentence or phrase they used. And on the prosecution side, it was that you don't bring a knife to a fist fight. And that makes sense until you think about it. So if you don't bring a knife to a fist fight, but when you look at the whole circumstances, do you bring 30 of your friends to a fist fight? Do you spray someone in the face with a can of WD-40 in a fist fight? Do you surround the person's car, pound on it, jump on it, throw rocks and beer cans at it in a fist fight? You know, so the idea that...
Meaning, just so our viewers can understand, describe, because I don't want the details of the case to get lost. Jimmy McGrath happened to be there. He was a 17-year-old Fairfield prep student, by all accounts, a promising lacrosse player, a great guy. Somehow he's caught in the foray of... Raul Valle said he was going back to protect his friend, right? And that there's some sort of instance where guys are in the car and all these other people, dozens or many other people are surrounding this car. They're drinking, they're out of hand. These teenagers are kind of wild and crazy. And so the defense was talking about that it would be self-defense for Raul Valle. Did that play into it, that you thought he was self-defending?
No, actually, that's the one thing I wanted to try to clear up is, for the jury, the self-defense argument never entered into it. Because according to the instructions, we're not even supposed to consider self-defense until we find him guilty of at least one charge. And so we never even got to the self-defense part in the case.
Step one, is he guilty? And you found him not guilty and then couldn't agree on the lesser charges. So explain to our audience, the lesser charges were reckless manslaughter. To this day, you still believe he was guilty of that?
Yeah, 11 of us did.
So how does it affect you as a human being when you think of, I know you're a dad and a grandfather, and you have Mr. and Mrs. McGrath saying, I thought I was in a different courtroom. Our son is dead, and this other person's just walking out. We don't think he intended to kill him either, but he still killed him. How does that weigh on you as a human, that Raul Valle was able to walk free, but Jimmy McGrath is dead?
Yeah, well, he's not exactly free yet. They're going to retry him on those charges. But I think, we really paid attention to the jury instructions. I had them in my lap. Anytime there was a question or controversy or something, we went back to those instructions and we tried to follow the law as it was written.
For sure.
And so
the two where you all had agreement, but when it came to the deadlock, do you feel that you couldn't move, and what's your hope for the future, given that 11 of you thought he was guilty on the lesser charges?
Yeah, the part that hurts us, I think, is that if they are going to recharge him and retry it, is that the family has to go through this whole thing again. And that was, that's the hardest part, that we couldn't make a decision one way or the other. And
some analysis has said the judge should have accepted the partial verdict, but made you go back and finish on not accept the deadlock and not do a mistrial. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I think like I said, we did go back and we deliberated for at least another 2 hours on that one charge, and there was no way this person was going to change their mind
on the reckless manslaughter. So.
And then the other thing is, too, also on the assault charges.
Which are the lesser charges of reckless assault?
On the 3 other individuals that he stabbed, during the earlier portion of the fight. That's another one that we couldn't understand those charges, because if we did get to the self-defense part of that, we didn't see any way the state could prove that it wasn't self-defense. When he was on the ground getting beaten and kicked, and that he had a knife, but if there was a rock on the ground or a garden tool, anything he could have used to defend himself in that case, would have been justified.
What did you think of Raul Valle on the stand as a 16-year-old crying? It was emotional to watch.
Yeah, but one of the things that we try to ignore was like any expression of emotions by the anyone who's on the stand, because a lot of it is kind of scripted and rehearsed, and so we know that. So we try to pay more attention to just exactly what is being said, and not their appearance.
Mm-hmm. And when you were picked for this jury, you said you weren't aware of how much this case was being watched around the nation, both locally here, but also on court TV, on the national news, and has anything changed for you looking back, becoming more aware now of the eyes on this case?
Yeah, well, I think the good thing is that a lot of us got picked because we didn't know that much about the case. And after sitting through the trial and being in the courtroom that time and not being allowed to watch the news or social media or anything else, I think there's a good reason for us only to hear what's being said in the courtroom. And so...
Did July 4th, the break in the momentum, play into it as far as you get a day off and you're not right where you left off?
No, I don't think so, because as soon as we got back into the room, as if we never left. Yeah.
And have you kept in touch at all with any of the other jurors?
No, that's the strange thing. When we walked out the door to our cars, we said a few things, and from that point on, I haven't seen or heard from any of them.
So, what is, now that you've done your civic duty, and obviously the McGraths are heartbroken, they want justice in some form, new charges, it sounds to me like you agree the prosecution, in fact, that was perhaps part of why you were able to allow a deadlock, is you felt like the prosecution is going to go forward and do something.
Yeah.
So you still think, after everything you've known, and you know more than most, that Raul Valle should be held accountable in some form?
Yeah, they can't just not come to some kind of a resolution on at least that charge.
The reckless manslaughter.
Yeah, the manslaughter charge.
And what's your thought now? A lot of the comments as you watch on YouTube are, how did this happen? How were parents allowing drinking? All this. I'm thinking, I have a 16-year-old son, and high school can be a difficult time for parents because kids are starting to exercise their independence. You end up at a party, there's drinking. What were you thinking as you saw? What do you think in the beginning, where there was a house party with alcohol and parents? Are they responsible?
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that I was saying too about the closing arguments. When the Raul Valle's attorney got up, instead of saying it was a knife at a fist fight, the phrase he said was, there was a whole lot of stupid going on that night. And that really summed up what happened. There was so much that was between the underage drinking and the fighting and the group chats and everything else. And again, that's the one thing that really kind of stuck with people, is that one 16-year-old kid is going to be held responsible for all those mistakes that happened by both the parents, the kids, everyone else that night. And so I think that's the bigger issue, that how did all this happen? It wasn't just one kid's fault. There was an awful lot of blame to go around, and no one else seemed to get blamed. I know there's a lot of civil cases that have gone forward.
There are wrongful death lawsuits.
But as far as the criminal charges, that no one else even got charged in this case was hard to get over too.
Did the prosecution do a good job?
I think that the two attorneys that were there did the best they could with the case they had. But even the testimony, they had over 25 witnesses, and there were so many contradictions and inconsistencies in all that testimony. So that's another thing we had to take into account when we were deliberating. So the testimony was either unbelievable or inconsistent, and so that was another issue that was hard for us.
Did the defense do a great job?
Well, it's the first trial, so I can't have anything to compare it to. But I think they did a good job.
I mean, he was acquitted, and then the mistrial on the others. So we don't know. We'll continue to watch what charges the prosecution may file. They can refile charges. But I know when we were speaking before the interview, you said that gave you a little solace, if that's the right word, that you thought they're going to get a chance to do this again, because as a human being, you would like to see accountability in this case.
Yeah, because it would be nice to see them resolve it in a way where they didn't have to go through another trial.
Like a plea agreement?
Like something like that, yeah, because it was there were some emotional parts for us to watch in the trial. And when the medical experts were testifying and they showed the pictures of the kids, everyone that got stabbed, and that, to see Jimmy McGrath and the others and the injuries, that was the first time we heard the reactions from the people watching.
The parents
McGrath
and
family, everyone
his sister,
else there.
Yeah.
And for them to have to go through that again, like you said, I've never had to deal with something like that. But if there was any other way to resolve this that would not involve another trial, I wish they could do something like that.
I did hear, I was listening to another interview where Mr. McGrath had said the trial was his way. He was going to start healing after the trial, and he was so confident in a guilty verdict. And now they're just kind of stunned, traumatized. They don't know what to do now. They're starting a foundation, which we hope to be speaking to them too. They're starting a foundation in honor of their son, who by all accounts, Jimmy McGrath, I want to acknowledge, there's still this 17-year-old whose life was cut so short. From all accounts in the trial, he seemed like a pretty amazing kid.
Yeah, and even in the whole situation, he wasn't directly involved in any of the attacks. He was just a bystander.
So he was just, from all the evidence you saw, he was kind of just in the wrong place. He was just a kid that was there, yeah. Yeah. And I think as a parent, as we're watching this, we can't bring Jimmy McGrath back, but as you said, you raised 2 girls. I've got 2 kids. And what kids are doing nowadays, just that idea of how important it is that we not, I guess, lose sight of what teens are doing, because this is essentially a house party that got way out of control in just a nice suburban community.
Yeah, that started over a fight over a 12-pack of Bud Light.
That was
the first fight at Lazy Brook, and then it all escalated from that because no one was under control.
Did those parents, from what you heard, turn a blind eye to what they should have known of how much drinking was going on in the first location?
I think so, because even from the testimony of some of the kids, this was not the first time they've had parties like this.
That was the party house.
This was in both houses, and just in general, that the drinking is just a way of life almost for 16 and 17-year-old kids. And so that's the scary part. Because, adults can act really stupid when they have a few drinks. And these kids, I was 16 myself. And, so we know that it's a terrible situation waiting to happen when you combine the alcohol and the kids.
Back to the intent, and I totally understand. You said that was really the biggest thing. You just didn't see intent for murder or manslaughter. But a lot of people come back to, didn't he leave, go back and get a knife, and then came back? So you would hope, I guess I was thinking when I was watching this, if it was my kid, I'd be like, oh my goodness, you've left a party where all that was going on, never go back, you're done, you've already left. How did that play into it, that people have said, but he got the knife and went back, he could have just left?
Yeah, well, there was a lot of contradictions in the testimony about the knife.
Okay.
And so one person, for example, one of the witnesses in the car said that he was going through the console and the glove compartment frantically searching for the knife. But everyone else testified that he was sitting in the back seat behind the driver with his girlfriend on his lap. So that he couldn't be searching for the knife. And so what probably was the case was the driver of the car had either thrown the knife to him or given the knife to him. Mm-hmm. And it was a mistake to put the knife in your pocket and go back with the others. Mm-hmm. But again, it comes back to, was it intentional or was it reckless? And so he most likely, when he didn't use that knife until he was on the ground getting beaten and kicked. So he didn't go back to that party with a knife with the intention of hurting someone with it.
Okay.
But knowing that you're going back and that something really bad might be happen if you have that knife on your person, was the way we looked at it.
Okay. And so basically, as you just said in the closing arguments, what stuck with you was a whole lot of stupid going on.
A whole lot, yeah.
Yeah.
On both sides.
What would you want to say to the McGrath family?
I've never been in their position, so I can't imagine what they're going through, and I wish we could have resolved it. I wish from the time of the initial charges until the end, I wish some kind of resolution so we could all kind of put this behind us and the healing could start. Maybe even getting to the point of forgiveness at some point. But that's not possible yet. And so I just I'm sorry that we didn't get to some kind of a conclusion.
And what would you say to Raul Valle, who was 16 and now 20?
Yeah, well, this isn't over for him either. He's still got a lot to go through, and he probably is looking at prison time at some point. But and I know to a kid who's 16 or 20, the possibility of a 40-year sentence, that's a life sentence to a kid at that age. But he will have, even though it's hard to picture right now, he probably will have a life going forward that Jimmy McGrath isn't going to have that opportunity. And so I hope that he learns and can make something good come of this, when he does get that chance.
Looking back, any regrets or any things that you'd want to change?
No, I mean, I don't regret at all being picked for the jury and even when we got back into the room and you had to choose a foreman. And so everyone looked around for a few seconds, and I said, if anyone feels like they're being called to do this, or they want to, or they think they should be, I'm fine with that. But if nobody really wants to do this, I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
And so that's how I ended up being the foreperson.
Did it play into if Raul Valle had been a full-fledged adult, at age 20 rather than 16 when it happened, would that have changed? How much did it matter that he was a teenager?
It played into it, because the 16-year-old brain isn't just as developed as someone else. And so maybe if he had been in his 20s, the decision in those 10 seconds to come back from the car onto the grass might have been it might have been easier to conclude that it was intentional.
But saying 16, that your brain isn't fully formed, that plays into it.
Yeah, that's where we said that whole definition of reckless, of extreme indifference, that just seemed to fit exactly what happened that night.
Anything else that you want everybody out there to understand?
No, just that an awful lot of people looking back on it after the trial, when we got to look at all the social media posts and people jumping to conclusions, even before they had any of the information. And then a lot of the hurtful, hateful stuff that was posted on social media. That's a part of, I think, a larger problem. I don't know if we've always been like that, or we just have an outlet for that kind of thing now that we didn't have before. But I would just...
Have you gotten any kind of hateful things directly to you, or do you feel...
No, I mean, I've seen some of the kind of the smart-ass comments online about what the jurors were and all that. But
yeah.
Personally, I haven't heard anything.
So what I think would be helpful is so people understand where you come from. So you're born and raised in West Haven, Connecticut.
Yeah.
You're a dad of 2 girls.
Yeah.
Grandfather, too.
Grandfather of 4.
Of 4. And you have spent your life working to help the hungry. You work with a food pantry now.
Yeah, well, that was a couple of lives. That's one I have now. And then before the food pantry, I worked for Connecticut Food Bank. But then before that, my dad and I owned a bar for 27 years.
You owned a bar.
So
okay.
That was that was a whole different life.
Did that play into it? Certainly you would have experienced, as your own human knowledge, you've experienced drunk people doing stupid things.
Yeah, when the defense attorney said a whole lot of stupid, and that's the thing. Alcohol can make make adults do a lot of stupid things, but when you have these underage kids, that's just it's like an accident waiting to happen, more than an accident, tragedy.
Yeah.
And so that was such a big part of it. If you took the alcohol out of that situation, none of this would have happened.
So for the parents who think, okay, I'm trying to keep my kids safe, I'll just let them drink at home, or I'll let them do this, kids be kids, what do you want them to understand?
No, that's not the way to do it. I never did that as a parent, owning a bar. And I knew my kids, especially one of them, was more inclined to do that kind of a thing. But you really want to just keep tabs on them. And when it really gets out of control with these house parties and that's crossing a line.
In this case, do you think there was an opportunity where it was getting out of control at the first stop and the parents could have intervened and ended it first?
If there were parents there.
Okay. So your understanding was that it was allowed, but maybe they weren't there. What was your understanding?
Yeah, well, there was one parent, one mother at the first party at Lazy Brook.
And they were charged with allowing underage drinking.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know what was going on in that situation. And then neither parent was there at Laurel Glen.
At the second location.
And at the second location.
Okay, yeah. So either parents allowing, looking the other way, or parents not being home. Yeah.
Yeah, so hopefully if something good comes of this, maybe people will begin to understand that this is not a situation that you should allow at all.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you for your time, and I think that none of us sat on the jury, so we can't understand how it felt to you or all the things that were going on, but it was something that I think the McGrath family was so stunned and other people were so stunned they really thought it was leaning towards some form of guilty, maybe not murder. So we'll have to see what happens. My understanding from talking to you, and thank you for your time, is you would like to see this go forward and have at least some of those lesser charges redone in some way.
Yeah, just so there be some kind of closure, and then people can move forward from that point. Because right now they're kind of in limbo, with this all still up in the air.
Yeah. Well, Jim Stolman, we appreciate your time. Thank you for helping us understand what was going on in the 3 weeks of that house party murder trial, and we will, of course, for all of you at home, keep covering exactly what's going to happen in the future as far as what the prosecutors are going to do with any refiling of new charges. But we thank you for joining us.
Okay, and thanks for the opportunity to maybe hopefully clear up a few misconceptions and
Yeah, we do sometimes get quick to judge when people just watch one little clip. So I think this is where this format on WFSB Plus is so valuable, is you can really get in the minds of what was going on, at least with you as the jury foreman, and what was happening really behind the scenes, and taking a deep dive with us. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
And that concludes our WFSB Plus special. You can continue to watch this on all of
All right, so that was Jim Stolman. We heard that he works for Connecticut Food Bank. He works at a food pantry. His dad and he owned a bar for, I think he said 20 or 26 years. So, all right, guys, let's take it down a notch. You guys are starting to attack each other, and we're not going to accept that. Okay, so if you can be civil to each other and have discussions without attacking each other, fine. State your opinion, that's fine. But if you start to attack each other, we're going to start to time you out, and we're going to delete your messages. So all I ask is that you be adults and you don't attack each other. There's enough hate going on in this world and with this trial. Let's not bring it in here. So just take a deep breath. If you need to step away, step away. I like to show these trials because I like to cover these trials. And when I see Chad attacking each other, that's it. All right? I'm not going to stand for that. So please, just take a deep breath and stop attacking each other, or we will start to delete your comments, and we will start to time you out and ultimately ban you. I don't want to have to do that. I want you guys to be adults. And if you are not able to respect each other, we're going to take action against you. So please, please, please respect each other, respect the chat, respect our mods, and respect the channel. Thank you. Now we're going to go on to Jimmy's family, and I expect this to be emotional as well. And if you guys can handle it, fantastic. If you can't, please see yourself out the door.
Thank you so much.
Hey, Camilla, how are you? While we're in verdict watch and waiting for verdict watch to begin with Washington versus Ali, we're just wrapping up what happened with Connecticut versus Raul Valle. There were a couple press conferences. The foreperson spoke. So we're just kind of putting it all together into one stream for you guys. So that's where we are with that. So. No, Gretchen, the kittens would not be proud of you. No, come on. I mean, you guys know. You guys that have been here long enough know the deal. You know the deal. If you're new to this channel, here's the deal. Don't attack another chatter. You can have your opinion, but be respectful. If you can't be respectful, go somewhere else. Bottom line. We're not going to stand for that here. Okay? I'm not going to say it again. Our mods are going to mod.
Thank you so much, both, for inviting us into your home and, for speaking about this challenging topic during this difficult time. So just thank you, first of all. Yeah. Kevin, Maggie, it's been a week now since the verdict has come out. If we can start there, Kevin, can you please take us to that day in the courtroom? We saw 8 to 10 marshals come in. I was in there. We were all completely silent. What was going through your mind? Can you take us through to that moment?
Sure. I mean, as you were there, it kind of all happened. So we kind of knew things were moving forward around 11:30 before lunch. We saw a lot of activity going in and out of the courtroom. And it was one of those, then it all fell in place. And, I went in there with a false sense of we were going to get justice that day. And when I heard the not guilty, I was just in shock. And then, I knew going in there was a partial verdict, and then there was going to be mistrial, but not anything more than that. So I was not prepared mentally for a not guilty, and for the person that is responsible for Jimmy's death to walk out of that courthouse free that day.
Yeah, and from what I remember, your side was very quiet. Your face was very red. What, aside from shock, what were you feeling? What were you thinking?
Just disappointment. I kind of, was using the court or the trial, the conclusion of the trial is kind of like my foundation to start to heal, and now that's been postponed, for a few months, a year, I don't know. So but getting the story out and going through the trial, as difficult as it was, it was very enlightening to us, right? So we really didn't have all of the facts of what happened that night. We never reached out to any of the kids to talk to them about it. So we had our own opinion on what happened. So I think it was very educational for us to know exactly what happened. And then for the people, even though we did not get justice that day, you saw the testimonies of all of the 3 individuals involved, and I think their testimony speaks to their character.
Mm-hmm. Right. Thank you. And, Maggie, for you, I know you weren't with us that day inside of the courthouse, but when you learned what the verdict was, what were your emotions?
I was really equally shocked. When I had left court on Tuesday, I saw Tatiana Messina, and I said, you and Mark Durso did an absolutely amazing job. And what will be, will be. But I had to bring my daughter down to Florida. So when I heard, it was just pure confusion. I truly feel like the jurors heard a different story than we did. The most impactful part of the story for me was that Jimmy wasn't in the fight. And the last thing was he has a knife, and you could see Jimmy backing away. It's all on video. Jimmy didn't have a weapon. Jimmy wasn't in the fight. And there was no reason for Raul to go after him. And I don't understand where the jurors didn't hear that part of the story. So it was shock. There was something about this trial that, let's put it to rest, because this has been lingering for 3 years. And it's judges, it's lawyers, it's court dates, and it was emotionally draining for 3 years. So we wanted this behind us. What they do after this is up to the state. We have no control over that. The problem I fear is Raul will hurt again. And it's just a matter of time. He has a violent past that wasn't able to be brought up in court. And we have a lot of stories about that. A lot of St. Joe's parents reached out to us in fear. He was never invited to, if there was an event or a party, or those 3 boys, Valle, Schneider, De Silva, were not included. They were not well-liked kids.
Gotcha. And, as you mentioned, the jurors, what were your thoughts on the timing of the time of deliberation? Because, again, as you're mentioning, from what you saw, the details were pretty clear.
They were really clear. I was in a little confusion and fear when they came after 2.5 hours of a deadlock. After 3 weeks of trials, an enormous amount of information from medical, from all the kids that were there. I think they had about 25 witnesses. How were they in deadlock in 2.5 hours? So there was a little fear there. Wait a minute, what's going on? And we weren't told, we weren't given any details on what the deadlock was.
Right.
And I think in hindsight, we kind of wish at the deadlock at 2.5 hours that they declared a mistrial completely. It would have been devastating, but I'd say not as devastating as what the result is. So we really truly believe that the prosecutors did a great job. They were thorough. There's a lot of information there, and I think some of it just got lost with the jurors. Again, still in shock over the verdict.
Right, and as you mentioned, in terms of so much information, is there a day that stood out to you the most, or just in general, regarding the number of witnesses and some of the testimonies that they shared? I know they started off a little bit on the law enforcement, medical side, and then we started to hear from some of the other victims, then just friends. Any of those days or specific testimonies stand out to you?
I think the one that really stood out was Raul's own testimony. I thought he did a great job for the prosecution. But in turn, somehow, he was able to convince them that, that he didn't have the intent to kill, or he didn't have the intent to hurt. But, it's just, physically, it's, knowing the type of knife that was used, he had to go in there with an open knife, from my opinion. So that was it infuriated. And then we went into 2 days off. So the 4th of July weekend, it just boiled in me. And then to come out, again, just in total disbelief.
With Raul's testimony, I'd like to add that he kept saying he was slashing. Slashing like
flailing.
this. Flailing. That was his word. This is flailing. This is a stab. So I don't understand, again, where the jurors heard one thing and we heard another. If he was on a fetal position, flailing, he would have hit ankles.
Right.
So how did he end up hitting my son's chest? Right. And how did the jurors not see that.
Throughout his testimony, when his attorney, was during his direct examination, he asked him, to your point, was it your intention to stab? And then he started naming each of the victims, and he said no. But he also, he did say no. We heard him say that, but he never apologized. Is that something you were hoping for, expecting?
No. We would never accept it, to be quite frank. I mean, the devastation that he has caused the three of us, Maggie, myself, and Rose, and then our whole community. I mean, this isn't just we lost a young man. The collateral damage, throughout our careers, Rosie's school, our friends, is just unfathomable. Jimmy was a resource to a lot of his friends that really relied on him for a lot of different things, and he's no longer there, and they're really struggling today.
Right. And thank you for leading me into my next question with that. We heard some really emotional and just heavy testimony. Something that stands out to me is Faison. He said that he would have given his life for Jimmy. It should have been him instead of Jimmy. We hear Ryan Hines say he thinks about this every day and what he could have done differently. The pain and Ricky Fiola also trying to help, Charlie Connery, all these people. How was it for you hearing that impact that your son, has had on so many?
I think that was one of the big takeaways, that we were too heavy in our own grief to realize the pain the kids and the community were going through. That was incredibly hard for us. We were very fortunate for the love and support through our family and our friends, but the impact to hear those statements was heart-wrenching.
I mean, and just to this day, we'll be at the grocery store, or at the beach, or somewhere where somebody will come up and be like, share with us all the wonderful things Jimmy did. So Jimmy was very inviting. As an upperclassman, he wasn't that jerk kid on the lacrosse team that was like, oh, you're a freshman. He embraced the freshmen. He embraced the new kids. It's one of a really emotional story for us is we were on the beach last year, and the team manager, Declan from prep, young boy, he was in grade school or middle school, and he was a team manager for the football team. Jimmy was the one that invited him into, when they got into the huddle before the game, Jimmy invited him to that. Jimmy had him on the football group chat, and that touches Declan. So just the impact that his death has had on so many people is it's overwhelming.
How has the community support, as you're mentioning, helped as well through all this? The courtroom was nearly packed every day on your side,
Sure.
with friends and family.
Yeah, that support is just amazing, because this is something that we weren't taking attendance to see who came, because it is extremely difficult to watch. But through our foundation, the support that we have through all of our events has been great. I can make a phone call today and say, hey, we're going to go down to the beach and let off, balloons, and we'll get 100 people out there. The support, the texts, the calls, the generosity, through the beginning, people have just have been there for us, and we want to be there for them now.
What does that look like?
So it's just through our foundation. So we set up the foundation in honor of Jimmy's name, right after his death, because we suffered other tragedies in Shelton, and the kids is all the same friend group. Right. So we knew they needed help. We worked with Adam's House, which is a grieving center for teens, and it was huge. We had that, they set up counselors. So we set up the foundation really to deal with the mental health issues of kids today, because what we found out through what Jimmy did in his early 17 years is he was a counselor to a lot of his friends. He did a lot of volunteer work with Bridgeport Youth Lacrosse. So he wanted to keep that memory, focusing on mental health, being, filling that void, and then also, looking at risk teens. What could our foundation have done if it was set up 5 years ago to address the issues with Raul Valle, Tyler Da Silva, and Jack Snyder? What drove them to be so angry that they wouldn't let this fight end? So those are the things we want to do. So we have a concert that we do annually in January, and then we have the golf tournament, which you attended, and it's a great time. It's a good time, and that is kind of, if you want to know who Jimmy is, the golf tournament it's him. I mean, it's fun. We're there for a great cause, and we're just there to celebrate his life.
Yeah, you can really feel the love and support that day out on the course. And so, as we try to move forward, what does justice look like to you both, to your family?
I think one of the things that, for me, Raul knows what he did. He has to live with that. What the state does after this week or the refiling, that's up to them. But I think for another trial for myself, I think it's too emotionally difficult to attend. And I don't think anyone that's ever been in court for a murder would disagree. So for me, justice will come. But Raul knows what he did.
And
for me, different, and we respect each other the way we go through this, because grieving's a different process for each individual. But I need the closure. I need to see the conviction. I need to see him leave the courtroom in custody. So he needs to be held accountable for what he did to our son and what he did to our community.
I feel so many communities want the violence to end.
And so with that in mind, even though you wouldn't want to attend, would you want to see the state retry these lesser charges?
I would.
Yes.
I would. I want them to, but I'm just emotionally, it's just too difficult. It didn't serve anything positive for me. But does he deserve to be locked up? Yes, he does.
Thank you. And I just want to circle back. In the beginning, you mentioned sort of learning some things that you didn't know about that night, being enlightened throughout the trial. Would you mind sharing some examples of what were some missing pieces?
Sure. So the missing pieces was the group chat. Yeah, the group chat, I was under the assumption, from Shelton, it was all of the let's say the witnesses that were named, right? So I thought they were all involved, only to find out it was just two individuals from Shelton. I'd love to know who added Raul Valle, Tyler Da Silva, and Jack Snyder to that group chat, because I don't even know who that is. I don't even think they were at either party. So what led to Raul going from Trumbull High to Laurel Glen, that was news to us. And then the fact that it was just basically, the Shelton, the teens that were at the Shelton party, there was 3 or 4 times that the group in the pilot could have left, and they decided to keep coming back. And that's where I'm really caught up on the dismissal of the intent charges, because that, to me, the minute they left Trumbull High School and went to Laurel Glen, that was intent. The minute they had the ability to flee, even if they were scared, they came back. And I just don't believe the testimony that they came back to take up a collection to pay for the windshield. So that story just bothers me. It's because it's not true. So just things like that. And, you know, from the Shelton boys, I know the video, you can't dispute the video. It looked ugly, but it was just, you know, they weren't the aggressors there.
And there wasn't 30 on one.
Right. It was, you know, it was like 4-on-1, and, you know, no one saw Raul get assaulted at all.
No scratches.
And no scratch, you know, with those little whatever, that could have been the fight the week before that he got into. So so there's just some things like that. So not, you know, kind of knowing more of the facts, and we didn't get 100% of the truth, but we're much more closer to it than we were 3 years ago.
Does that help in your closure?
It really does, to be honest with you. It does help. Because I was under false assumptions on a lot of things, and I'm glad, you know, we have the transparency to see what, you know, again, we're getting closer to the truth. Yeah, so whether, you know, the next round of court cases, we get a little more closer, you know, what we do on the civil side, if we get more transparency from what happened that night, that's important to me. It's not as important to my wife. She just wants to kind of move forward and put this all behind us. But unfortunately, I need more truth before I could let go.
I think that's fair. Anything else either of you would like to add?
Probably from Rosie.
What were you doing when you found out?
Me and my mom were on a plane to Florida, so we did have a little bit of connection on the flight. And I couldn't watch it. I heard not guilty, and then there was also so much going on in those few minutes that I was just like, I cannot watch this. It was just very overwhelming for me. So we were going to Florida to move into a new apartment for school this semester. And I think I needed to kind of escape in a way. It was just too heavy on me. It was very hard to hear.
Mm-hmm. How have you been able to, you know, stay strong through all this and also be a support to your parents?
It's hard. Every day is very different. Some days I'll have a bad day. Some days my parents will have a bad day. You just try to stay active, and I find it's very important to have like a good routine. Trial was hard because that was the whole day, and then after I'd get home, we would just kind of like all isolate, go into our rooms. So that was very hard for me. But I think staying active, going to school, being with my friends and family it makes me strong. I want to be strong for myself, but I also want to be strong for others. You just have to try every day.
Right. Yeah, as your parents were saying, grief sometimes it is different for everyone, and it looks different for everyone. You know, some of the witnesses that we heard from, they, you know, shared in the courtroom that they met Jimmy through you. How was it, you know, for you also hearing from some of your friends? Are they still your friends, the people who said they knew you?
Yeah, I'd say all the witnesses from the Shelton High party, that's my main friend group, that's my core friend group. It was such a disturbing process to go through because each person that night had a different story, they saw different things, and I just would never wish that pain on anyone. We all go through different grief, of course. I hate that my friends have to deal with that as well.
Right.
It's very upsetting, and they're strong, but they deal with it every day, just like me.
Have people reached out, you know, whether it's been during this trial, afterwards, even this past week?
Absolutely, yeah. People I don't even know of reach out to me. People from different states reach out, but my friends, I'd say, are my biggest support. A lot of my friends were there that night, so I have to support them as well, but I really am so thankful for my friends because they reach out all the time. And they don't even have to reach out. I just know they're there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Rosie.
All right, so that's that. That was the Jimmy's family, and it's interesting. Dad says he needs to have closure, but Mom says a new trial won't serve any purpose for her. But she does feel that Raul deserves to be locked up. And the group chat, that was what was missing for us too. That group chat was definitely missing. Definitely missing for us. All right, I'm going to play one more clip. We're going to play one more clip that finalizes everything and that he will get charged again. And then we're going to go over to Washington versus Ali because they are in verdict watch and we want to make sure we do not miss anything over there. So let me get in here.
McGrath and the intentional assault of 3 other people.
So new charges have been filed, as we know, but now we're going to hear, here are the new charges. First-degree reckless manslaughter, 2 first-degree reckless assaults, that's on Ryan and Tommy, and then the second-degree reckless assault is on Faison. All right, so we'll finish here. This is only like 2 minutes, and then we're going to bounce over to Washington versus Ali.
Just days after 20-year-old Raul Valle was acquitted in the murder of Jimmy McGrath and the intentional assault of 3 other people, there's now new movement in the case. NBC Connecticut's Julia LeBlanc explains from Milford Superior Court.
Last week, Raul Valle walked out of this courthouse as a free man, and now we're learning prosecutors may not be done with him just yet.
Not guilty.
Less than a week after a jury reached a partial verdict for Raul Valle, prosecutors are signaling they're interested in moving forward with the charges jurors were hung up on. Though they acquitted him of murder, intentional manslaughter, and intentional assault, they were asked to consider the lesser included charges, which carried a reckless component. The jury's foreperson says they were leaning 11-1 guilty on those lesser charges, but couldn't come to an agreement. Now, prosecutors are signaling with this document that they may formally pursue those amended charges.
These are charges that were included within the original charge on which there was an acquittal. And so now we are initiating a formal proceeding on those lesser included charges that had been implicit but not explicit in the first charging document.
The document carrying charges for the reckless manslaughter of 17-year-old Jimmy McGrath and the reckless assault of 3 others that night in May of 2022.
The reckless conduct is, I think, where we get into, we heard a testimony during the trial that he wasn't necessarily stabbing at people, that he was sort of flailing a knife around in the air. That's what I could imagine as being reckless conduct. If there's 40 people around you and you're flailing a knife in the air, there's a possibility, a good possibility, that somebody's probably going to get stabbed with that knife.
Now from here, the attorneys we spoke with say it'll be up to state prosecutors on how they want to move forward. If they want to formally charge Valle with those other counts, they'd have to file a completely new document and basically start from the beginning. We're in Milford. Julia LeBlanc, NBC, Connecticut News.
All right. Well, now we know that they did formally file those charges. So, yeah, he has been. So, first-degree reckless manslaughter, 2 first-degree reckless assaults. Those would be on Ryan and Tommy. The reckless manslaughter would be on Jimmy, and then the second-degree reckless assault would be on Faison. So, all right, that's where we stand right now. All right, we're going to end this stream, and we're going to portal everybody over to Washington versus Ali. So we're going to go from one emotional trial to another. So hope you guys are ready. Thank you to our mods. Thank you for keeping this a safe space for everybody, and thank you to Aaron for doing work on the behind the scenes as always. We appreciate you guys being with us. And as I always will leave you, this is emotional trials, and I always like to leave you with Super Bowl. So hopefully that will help calm everybody down and just take a deep breath. We know these are emotional trials. We know it's hard sometimes to not to keep your emotions in check, if you will. I'm not saying don't express your emotions. I'm just saying don't attack somebody. Don't attack the chat. Don't attack a mod. Don't attack the channel. So we're doing the best we can. We appreciate that you guys are here with us, and we just want you to express your opinions. That's fine. Just when you start to attack somebody else, or you're crossing a line that we feel you're crossing, then we will take action. So all that being said, thank you again for joining us. We're going to now bounce over to Washington versus Ali and Ali. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in a bit. Thanks. Bye.